Life can be fast-paced, strenuous, and flat-out overwhelming. Life transitions and taboo topics can make it hard to catch your breath. Welcome to Breathe, a podcast that enables you to slow down, get your bearings, and engage in real conversations where no topic is off limits. Breathe is presented by Breath of Life, hosted by David Person and speaker-director Pastor Debleaire Snell.
Welcome to Breathe. I'm David Person. Good to be with you. And look what we've got here. We've got flowers in the garden.
We do. Flowers in the garden.
Flowers in the garden.
Listen, it's just been barren rocks
and
weeds. But now we got some color and life and foliage in the room today.
Love it, love it, love it. So along with Pastor Debleaire Snell,
right?
we have Mrs. Gianna Snell.
Hey,
welcome
y'all.
back.
Hey, it's been a minute.
Yeah, it has. It has. You've been avoiding us. What's up?
Yeah.
We haven't
I
seen you
have,
around.
but I had to come out of hiding.
All right, beautiful. Good to see you. And also,
Hi.
Mrs. Danita Jones. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good,
It's good to be
good.
back. Y'all
Yeah.
made changes.
Yeah, we got
I
hot
see.
swag on.
Listen, those are
Swag
going to
on.
come up missing is what
Yeah.
those shirts are
See,
going to come
we
up
already
missing.
got a confession on
I'm
tape.
saying, I feel like if I say it beforehand, then I
Yeah.
can ask for forgiveness
That's right.
later.
That's what
I'm
it
not
is.
sure if that's how it works.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Okay. Well, look, we're glad to have you all with us today, and the conversation should be very interesting because we're going to talk about something that we all are very familiar with. Outlaw. I'm sorry, not outlaws. In-laws. 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 In-laws.
Watch it.
How do we deal? How do we deal with our in-laws?
In-laws.
You know, because Thanksgiving is like literally just a few days away.
Yeah.
So
There are a lot of folk that are getting ready for company right now.
Right.
And for a lot of people, it tends to be a little stressful.
could be
There's some dread or
Could
angst
be.
or anxiety.
You
And so
know?
we thought maybe it'd be a good conversation to have
Right.
as those are as you're decluttering a closet right
That's
now.
right. That's right.
Getting ready for your
That's
in-laws
right.
to come.
And anticipating whatever. And of course, we know there are good in-law situations
there are.
as well as
Yep.
some not so good. So we just want to deal with all of that.
Yeah.
All right. So, how do we get into this conversation? First of all, do in-laws get a bad rap, Pastor Snell, do you think? I started off with the joke about outlaws.
Yeah,
and,
versus in-laws.
But in all seriousness, you think we're a little too tough on the in-laws?
So now I can just say I think Gianna and we can attest that we both have good in-law situations.
Yeah.
And we're blessed in that regard.
Yes.
But just I'll say as a pastor and doing a fair amount of counseling over the years, I do think the reputation and the suspicion or the anxiety in some ways is well deserved. And I think that it's a space that most people have to learn how to navigate through trial and error, because I don't think that there's a lot of instruction on the front end. So I think that even when you look at a lot of the counsel in books or just conversations, they tend to be about how the couple operates in a silo. What to look for, what to become, what to avoid, red flags, so on and so forth, But I don't think that, and because in America we tend to have a little bit more of a individualistic kind of approach to family, we don't really give a whole lot of counsel or instruction on just kind of the communal aspect of engaging in a family. The truth is, you do not just marry that person. And you all just have this exclusive access, independent of any other pressures, observations, opinions, so on and so forth. You join a network, and your partner joins a network, and there is maybe a science or an approach to navigating that space. So I just think that where there's not intentionality, or where there hasn't been instruction, or there are just not convictions about how to navigate it, I think it's an issue that weighs heavily on a lot of couples.
Yeah. What do you think, Sister Snell? What do you think?
I agree, and I'd never really thought about the fact that that's not really a chapter in the premarital counseling book. How to navigate and, the different things that may need to be set up, like, different boundaries and different conversations, and the fact that you are joining two families. And so I agree that it's definitely tough. As far as in-laws getting a bad rap, I think that they do.
You think they do? Okay.
Yeah. And so sometimes when you hear people say something like, I love my in-laws, we have a great relationship, people are like, yeah, I'm waiting for the shoe to drop. Whatever. And so because most of the time, what's highlighted and what's focused on is those really bad relationships. So, I think it's good to focus on the fact that there are some good. How did that come about? And then how do you navigate the ones that are kind of tough?
Yeah. What do you think?
So I think this is almost a one-sided conversation because everybody's saying it. Like my in-laws are incredible, and so much so that they refer to me as their daughter. So it gets really confusing when people are getting introduced to me because they're like, oh, this is our son and this is our daughter. And then they get really freaked out when, me and hashtag the boyfriend like share a kiss and they're like, oh, I'm like, no, I'm the in-law. But I have a hot take because while I agree.
Yeah, hot take.
While I agree that
maybe we should get a disclaimer.
Right.
These don't necessarily represent
exactly.
the beliefs and the convictions of the Breath of Life Ministry. No.
I agree you marry into a network. I've always believed that. But I believe that bad in-laws are cultivated by not so great relationships. Because if you come into a marriage with the understanding that I'm going to protect my spouse, it's kind of hard to have a bad in-law because you as a person are going to check your parents. I'm not going to allow anyone to mistreat my spouse.
Yeah.
Even if that means I got to check my mama. So if I see a couple that says, my in-laws are terrible to me, I'm going to actually question the relationship that the couple has. Because if you are allowing your spouse to be mistreated by your family, there is a greater problem inside of the relationship.
That's such a fascinating point. I didn't realize that's where you were going. but it's maybe it's even more than serendipitous. Maybe it's the Holy Spirit.
Yep.
In that I was thinking just before you answered, the word that came to my mind was boundaries.
Yeah.
And that's what I hear you saying.
Absolutely.
That there should be boundaries. You got to create boundaries, even with the in-laws or other family members.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I think it's actually embedded in one of the early texts in Genesis where the Bible talks about, when a man takes on the wife, he shall leave his father and mother's house and cleave or fasten himself to his wife, and the two become one flesh. So I think even kind of built in that is the idea that there is some separation, that there is not this blurred, hybrid family unit, that each marital couple creates an order, a tradition, a construct that is agreed to by the two, that are governing that particular space. It's funny because that's one of the things that, it's funny. I don't even know how that came up, but I remember my dad even just saying as a teenager and a young man, I wasn't even close to being married, but he would just forecast. And he would just say, when you get married, you don't ever let anybody come in and dictate the order or the tone or the temperature of your home. And he would say, not even me, and so those were, kind of certain values, that I carried. I didn't understand why it was important. Until, of course, you get married and then you begin to, to see life. But I do think that there are just, so even to that point, because I agree with you, but there are just certain things, though, with the breakdown of the family where you see some young man who is raised by a single mom and she's been mom and dad and her life is revolved around young man and she's invested, so on and so forth. It's an interesting dynamic. You know what I'm saying? In some way, he's become best friend. And that young man takes on a wife. It's not that he doesn't know necessarily that he's not concerned about his wife or protecting her. But I think that there is not a point of reference that he has to draw from. He didn't see a dad do those things or kind of put those parameters in place. And so now it's an interesting dynamic that is at work, because now he's got this woman who has been there from the beginning to the end, made him who he is, so on and so forth. And now there's a wife. And it's not that he's trying to prioritize one above the other, but I think that there is an information gap and just a sense that this is a right or righteous thing to do, to kind of create not, she's unwelcome. We don't want her here, but to kind of say, no, there is an order. And in that home, wife is apex, wife is queen. So it doesn't matter if your sister comes, it doesn't matter if your mom comes, it doesn't matter if even to your daughters, you know what I'm saying? Wife, she's the queen of that castle. Yeah. And I do think that there's, because of certain breakdowns, I think that there are certain values that are not, that should be organic or not even taught, but because I saw this order, like there's some who are kind of struggling to do it on the fly.
So what do you do when, and I agree with you, that is exactly the mindset that a couple should have, but what do you do when the in-law doesn't see it that way, when the in-law expects primacy because they see themselves as, well, I'm the father of this family, this whole family, and that includes this married couple here. Yeah, I'm the leader of this, or the mother.
I'm the patriarch, or the
matriarch. I'm the matriarch. Yeah. I'm the patriarch. What do you? How do you navigate that then? Do you think?
Yeah, so I think I think a couple of things. I do think that there is a time to give reverence, preference, homage to parents, older grandparents, or whoever that person is. But I don't think that necessarily extends over to you kind of dictating the terms of my house. So I think part of it is, I think one of the keys, I think Danita kind of touched on it, is that couple has to be agreed. If that couple is not agreed or united on, all right, this is how we're going to run our home, this is how we're going to engage, this is how we're going to fellowship, it is kind of the lack of unity between the two that actually creates the space for that in-law to kind of come in and kind of trespass in ways that are inappropriate or destructive to the relationship. So I think unity there dwells first. And then, to the point that was made earlier, I think there ought to be an obligation in the sense of, in terms of communicating expectations or liberties. So for instance, my brothers they are like 10 and 9 and 13 years younger than me. So they were like, by the time I got married, they were still high school young. So like when they wanted to come to the house and hang, you know what I'm saying? They were used to, before I got married, they just come in the bedroom, chill, play games, so on and so forth. But it was not when they got married and they had not quite made that switch, because they're young guys. They're they're high schoolers, so on and so forth. That wasn't her responsibility to correct them. Like that responsibility never goes to deal with your family. It is your primary responsibility to communicate and put that barricade up around family. So that was my responsibility to talk to my brothers and say, hey, this is no longer yours. This is not a common space anymore. Y'all gotta hang it. And they completely got it. They just needed information. Or if there was something kind of with a relative or something of her side of the family, I, by and large, unless someone was to disrespect her, which is not, again, a part of our dynamic, she's going to be the one to communicate with her side of the family and say, this is kind of how we move as the Snells, so on and so forth. And so I just think there has to be unity, but I think the responsibility of dealing with said in-law belongs to the direct family member of that in-law.
So, Mr. Snell, what do you say to the person, the spouse, who does not have the courage or maybe it's not even a question always of courage, but maybe just the communication skills.
A lot of times that's what it is.
I suspect a lot of times it is courage, but either courage or the language to communicate to the in-laws, hey, this is our space here.
Yeah, I actually just talked with someone who was dealing with this exact situation, and there was just that gap. And I think that there are certain personalities as parents that can be very intimidating. And based on their dynamic leading up to this, there was just a cowering back or a saying like, I just default. But sometimes the actual spouse who is not the child will have to prayerfully, led by the Holy Spirit, communicate the boundaries, communicate where things have gone left. I don't recommend that as the first option at all, ever. But I have heard of people who are able to communicate that, led by the Holy Spirit, very prayerfully, to say, listen, this is what it is. Because it has to be done. Those boundaries have to be expressed. It has to be communicated, because you cannot allow anything outside of your marriage to destroy it and to put weight on it.
Yeah.
And you have to draw that line. So if the spouse will not do it and cannot do it and doesn't have the skills, then you have to get into your prayer closet and ask God to open up that door, build the relationship. We're not talking about going and telling them off, getting all up in their face, but saying, hey, let's have a conversation.
Right. You saw that? Yeah.
Those looking on YouTube,
Swinging that neck
Y'all see what I be dealing with? Y'all see what I be dealing with at home? Y'all see what I be dealing with?
that finger wagging and neck.
But yeah, just communicating. This is how this makes me feel.
Yeah.
This is how we're going to run our home. This is what's going on. And a lot of times people know their child. They know why their child hasn't come to say it. They know the dynamic.
Yep.
And so if the other spouse has to default to that, then you got to do it to protect your marriage and your family.
Any thoughts, Sister Jones?
Oh, I got one.
Jump on it. I can see it cooking. I can see it percolating.
So my take is that peace is priceless.
Okay.
And oftentimes you have to ensure that that is the goal, no matter how much that may disrupt, what your ideal situation may be.
Yeah.
I have noticed in the people that I have talked to that the in-law situation being a problem is never the surprise after the wedding. It has never been a surprise after the wedding. Nobody is shocked that their mother-in-law or father-in-law are these terrible people that cross boundaries. That joint was happening during the planning process.
Yep.
That was happening during the relationship. The mom was demanding time when y'all were trying to go out on dates. Like it is, and you have to think to yourself as a person, is it really worth it? And I know that it may be a controversial question. But
you mean, is it really worth it to move forward?
Because you marry a network.
Yeah.
Peace is priceless.
Okay.
And you have to think to yourself, worst case scenario, right? We've talked about on the show how marriage doesn't change the tune, it turns up the volume, right? So is it really necessary for me to engage in this relationship if in worst case scenario, he never says anything to them? If he just continues to allow this, if we have children and we still have to deal with this. If now you're demanding that I raise them like you say, if you're demanding I cook like you say, I've seen horror stories where they send their child over to the in-laws' house and the kid comes back with a shaved head because that's what we always do, without any permission, without any conversation.
Right.
And when they talk to their spouse is like, oh, well, that's my mom. Or, that's my dad. That's just how they are. I'm of the mind, my favorite saying is that the color of red has 57 shades. When those red flags start flying, before you say I do, that conversation needs to happen then. Your parents are not nice to me. I can see it now. And if this isn't something that we can address now, I don't see this relationship going further.
Wow.
Because now you have complicated it when you marry, when you have children. There's no peace when I go to Thanksgiving. There's no peace when I go to their house for Christmas. I don't want them over. We are now damaging our relationship because when we were dating, you didn't say, hey, yo, that's out of line. Don't do that. And I say, as much as it would hurt, as much it would be, hurtful or horrible, sometimes you got to say no.
Yeah.
Sometimes you got to tell them
So
no.
your heart may be saying yes to the person.
Yes.
But your mind is saying no,
No to the network. There you go, boss.
No to the
No
network.
to the network.
Yeah.
And you're talking about in the
Interesting.
context of this person, you're seeing that they're not willing or able to,
Correct.
kind
Yes.
of address
Correct.
the issues.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because if you're willing to address it during, then we have a shot.
Yeah.
If you're willing to call it out while we're dating during the wedding process, and that's usually where you kind of start to see that happen anyway. because the planning process of the wedding is stressful.
Yeah.
Stress kind of reveals character.
Yep.
You know, when it starts happening there and you're starting to notice there, like when my mom says that she wants to wear white. Like what I saw that in the article where the guy was just like, well, it's my mom, and it's, you know, she feels like it's her wedding too.
Yeah.
Huh.
Well, I think, and I think, so just to be clear, because I think especially when you're talking about certain abuses, not like just inconveniences.
Correct. Yeah.
Like you're going to have relational stuff that just, you see the world differently. You come from a different cultural context. But I think when we talk about just outright disrespect,
correct,
and they're defiant about the disrespect, they've drawn a line in the sand around the disrespect. I think it's actually a very revealing thing that happens. And I think a lot of times when we talk about being equally yoked, we just put it in the context of religion exclusively. But I think you have to be equally yoked in terms of a shared vision of what family looks like and how it is ultimately demonstrated. And so I think that those things are very, very critical, especially when we're talking about having kids. Like if I'm going to put my kids, and you reference a situation, in that space with this, this family, I want to do that without any apprehension. I need to be able to do that without any concern. I need to kind of do that knowing they're going to be safe, they're going to be whole, and that the values of my home will be reinforced in some way, or at least respected.
Yeah, not undermined.
Not undermined, or just completely outright rejected. You see what I'm saying? So I think it's it needs to be a part of that rubric that you're looking for when you're considering it. And I think the key is, I think there are a lot of people that think marriage is the cure. When we say I do, it'll go away, or it'll just get better. And I think it's either the time for you to say no, or to require that your partner begin to address it. Because this is the thing. So post-marriage, I've seen it get better. But I'll be honest with you, it's kind of like trying to stuff toothpaste back into the tube like 7, 10, 14 years into the marriage. And, you know, when your in-laws come around, it's a space that you tolerate as opposed to being able to really celebrate and enjoy it. It's a tense time. People hate Christmas. You know, they don't look forward to the holidays, you know, just because of those dynamics that just haven't been addressed.
So in the few minutes that we have remaining, let's do some troubleshooting for some folks, because there's some people who are going to probably hear this podcast or watch it and think, this is all great advice, but you know what? I am here. I am in this marriage. And regardless of all of what you're saying, I now, in a few days, I got to deal with this again.
Got to deal with it.
So what do I do to get through the holiday?
Man, I was going to say something. I better not say it. All right, so it was a numbing. Anyway, so I think, but I do think it begins though. So when we talk about managing the outside influences, I do think it goes back to, are we agreed? Are we agreed?
Absolutely.
Because honestly, if we're not agreed and devoutly agreed on certain things, then it just really doesn't matter what you say to anybody else. So, and what I mean when I say that, it can't be, all right, I want it to go this way, and I need you to communicate to your family what I want. Because you know how it is whenever you're trying to speak for somebody else, you don't really say it with conviction. It's just like, well, you know, Danita thinks you should, so on and so forth. You don't say it with conviction.
Which just creates another problem.
And it creates another challenge, right? So, or really what it does is it allows you to kind of maybe avoid the fire, but then you kind of basically create resentment toward your spouse. So whenever you're communicating on behalf of the home that says, okay, listen, we're going to start the day with worship, or we're going to say prayer, or we're going to, whatever that thing is, you got to communicate in the context of us, but like, this is my shared conviction. I'm not talking on behalf of Gianna because she can't speak. I'm saying, like, this is the way we are going to go about it. And I just think that, then I think those conversations, need to be, certain conversations need to be had preemptively.
Yes.
Not at the dinner table when everybody's there. Not once certain things that are foreseeable begin to manifest. So even certain things, like, let's just say, you're going to an in-law or and they have a dog, but or you have a dog and your in-laws can't stand it. Like, you all have to have a conversation before they enter into that space, not a confrontation or a combustible situation, because the conversation that was not had in season now creates an uncomfortable season. So I just think it just needs to be a semi-detailed conversation about what our values are, what our priorities are, what our customs and traditions are. And then I just think you need to have a direct, prayerful, but firm communication with the repeat offenders about what the boundaries are and what the consequences are going to be for not respecting the customs, traditions, and values of this home.
I'm going to speak to the person who maybe doesn't have the ideal situation and they truly have a toxic type in-law who, no matter what has been said, no matter what has been done, they're just going to say something out of the way.
And those people are there.
They're there. So one thing I'm going to say is protect your peace, as Danita said earlier. Whatever that looks like. If that looks like you doing some extra meditation that morning, getting out for a walk, deciding, you know what, let's do the dinner in a neutral location. Like, whatever that is for you, protect your peace. And there are truly certain people, when we talk about boundaries, like, they don't need to be there. And I've experienced that, not personally, but through family and friends who have had to do that because there's just that person is not surrendered to God. And there is a literal hatred there that's happening. And they're spewing toxicity. And they're saying things that are not kind, that are not of God, and that will take you back to another place. And so you've got to protect your peace as a family, as a unit. And I do think you need to be on one accord. Don't just disappear and leave the rest of the family, but come together and say, what are we going to do? The other thing that I just learned yesterday, a reference from a book called Triggers, is to go ahead and prepare your response to those questions. Sometimes people will ask you things that are triggering. When are y'all going to have a child? Or why y'all got these, just all the questions. Have your response ready. Start thinking now of how you're going to respond, because you know that one person that's always going to say something or be all up in, why you make them beans like that? Like, just be ready with your response so that trigger doesn't hit you, and just protect your peace. Do what you got to do to be in peace, and then prepare your responses for the questions and for the things that may pop off that usually rub you the wrong way and get you reared up.
Prepare for the triggers.
I love the conversation before confrontation. I love that. I know this younger generation gets a really bad rap, but I think there are some things that they have, for lack of a better conversation, made really popular that I kind of agree with. One of them is the conversation. And then, they've kind of put a label on it, but the whole low contact, no contact. Where they have the conversation first, be like, look, this is inappropriate. We don't agree with this. We don't agree how you do this, or every time we come over, this happens. And the person will be like, well, this is who I am. And okay, we're going to go low contact first, which means that we are going to communicate with you, but it's going to be on our terms, and we're going to, make sure that we are still keeping our peace. And if they still continue to breach that, then they go no contact. Where it's just like, we have to remove you from the space. Now, back in the day, that is like the ludicrous idea.
It is.
Like, our generation, like, you're not going to talk to your mama?
Right.
But at the end of the day, we're like, what's healthier in your relationship? Us continuing to let mom come into the situation and ruin holidays, ruin birthdays, ruin birthday parties, or having the conversation, not having the confrontation, because at this point, you have proven to us how you are going to operate. You have shown who you are. You are not allowing God to lead you in the situation. Because I have a hard time believing that a person that is mean is allowing God to lead their lives. Like, just mean, I don't think that's possible. Like, how can you be horrible to anybody and say that God is the head of your life? It's impossible. So what we're going to do is, because you are not aligned with us spiritually, we are not equally yoked in this situation. This is a God house. That isn't over there. We don't need to talk anymore until he comes into your life and says or changes you, because I can't do that,
But I get what you're saying. Yeah. But this is my belief, though. I do believe that and so even in the conversation, this conversation is not like it's not an inclusive dialogue. I'm not really asking you for your opinion.
Ooh, yeah.
I'm communicating intent.
Yeah.
Like I'm communicating the decision, the values, and I'm just kind of laying out what it is. And I think if that person has value for the relationship, they're going to adjust. Because even the most toxic, crazy people, they're not crazy all the time. They don't act like that on their job. They don't engage with everybody like that at church.
That's
You know what I'm saying?
true.
They know who at church they can act a fool with. They know who at church they can't. You know what I'm saying? They know who on their job they can press in on, and they know who on their job they can't. And I just think the same thing applies to especially adults, you know what I'm saying, in a family construct. Like, there's certain, it's so funny I'm trying to say, there's certain people, they know which sibling's house they can go in and take over and run things and have all kind of things to say. And they know which house they cannot come in and do that. And so, again, we're not creating an unwelcoming environment. The conversation is not saying we don't want you here. The conversation is, man, I love you. Man, I want you to be a part of my kids' upbringing. I want to share space with you. But like when we are here, this is kind of what it has to be. In Jesus' name, if that helps. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
But that's kind of really, really what it is. And I just think, clear, direct, firm conversation, it actually covers a multitude of sins. I just think where a lot of the toxicity comes, it's just kind of like, it's because so much is being swept under the carpet. I think that's the most dangerous, unhealthy practice. You can kick that can down the road, but all you're doing is you're storing the confrontation. You're saving it, and it's you put it in a savings bond, and it's gathering interest. You know what I'm saying? The more and more you do that, right? So I just think the sooner, more directly, clear, and united you are in it, I just think it is a healing. It is a path to healing and wholeness for your family going forward.
So basically, I love you. But I will kick you out of my house in Jesus' name.
In Jesus' name.
God bless you, and I love you.
God bless you, and I love you. Yeah.
The boss says that you have to add that part.
Add it in. You got to have the authority of the Lord with you when you declare it,
Yeah, because God is able. He's able. I've seen God turn around relationships. And just as marriages grow, relationships with in-laws can grow.
They can grow.
That's a great
things
point.
start out rocky,
That's a great point.
and you're learning how to communicate. You're learning how to use your voice, because sometimes we're I just want her to like me. I just want them to like me. We just go along with stuff, and we see those red flags, but we're like, I just want them to like me. And then as you get, further along, you're like, you know what? I got a voice. Let me use it. And I think that there are things that, just like a marriage will inevitably grow if you continue to water it, those relationships with in-laws can grow. God can turn it around.
And I think to that point, though, like once you're married, you're no longer seeking approval. Like you're no longer auditioning for that role.
That's right.
You got the part.
That's right.
Like at that point, your goal is simply to be a loyal, faithful, Christ-centered, loving relative or son-in-law, brother-in-law, whatever it is. Like it's a different standard, because I think when you're in your auditioning mode or you're trying to seek approval, you compromise values and principles because you're trying to get something that in some ways it might be unattainable, depending on the person or the personality. So like I think you have to kind of shift out of that mindset to say, okay, I'm in this family. And I'm going to, as Paul says, as far as it depends on me, I'm going to live at peace with all men. I'm going to be loving, kind. Matter of fact, I'm going to be sacrificial. I'm going to go out of my way. You know what I'm saying? They ask me for one step, I'm going to take two. But at the end of the day, you know what I'm saying, I have some things that I realize this takes me out of character.
Right.
This pushes me outside of my values. This disrupts my peace, or this creates tension between me and my spouse. And it's funny, there's this great analogy that says a good marriage is like a pair of scissors. It destroys anything that gets in between the two sides. And I think anything that tries to come in between here, we got to be like a heat-seeking missile. You know what I'm saying? Like anything that tries to get in between these two sides has to get destroyed.
Love it.
I do want to add, I know we got to go, but I do want to add this, and this is more so advice for anybody who is the parent of someone that is single or seeking to date or seeking to get married. Your job as a parent eventually turns into like a consultation after a while. You need to raise your children to be independent of you and not solely reliant on you.
That's right.
And I think what happens is that when you run into these situations like what you described earlier about like the single mom and the son, there was something disproportionate happened early on where the mom did not understand her role is to raise him to leave her. Your job as parents are to raise them to leave you. You need to raise them to cleave unto their spouse. You should not be in their house. You should have no desire to do that. And rely on the fact that God allowed you to raise this kid to the best of your ability and to have all of the things that they need in order to be able to be a functional member of society. But under no circumstances do you need to continue to raise an adult or that adult's situation. So let it go. Go on vacation. Leave it alone. Let them be married. Let them have their house.
Release.
Release. Exactly.
No, it's your work is done.
You're finished.
So I took some notes here. I'm gonna try to summarize. There were a lot of diamonds dropped here today. Be secure in your place. Once you're married, you're not auditioning anymore.
I love that.
This is your place. So walk in your authority in your place. To commandeer a common Christian term or phrase there. Conversation before confrontation. Really like that. Try to have that conversation before it comes to confrontation. Protect your peace. Protect your peace. So you have to prioritize yourself in trying to manage this and not allow yourself to be compromised, right? So take a walk or meditate more or maybe there's some other things you can do. We won't get into all of that. Low contact, no contact. I like that. We're gonna confront you in a very low contact kind of way, and then if that doesn't work, we might have to put you in that no contact category. Again, and that's part of protecting your peace too.
It is absolutely.
So, brothers and sisters. As Thanksgiving is now just a few days away, take that into the holiday season with you. Great advice. Replay the episode if you need to refresh your memory. God bless you, and don't forget, no matter how challenging it may be to deal with in-laws, stop, pray, and breathe.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Breathe is produced by David Person for Breath of Life. Executive producer is Debleaire Snell, and sound engineer is Kirk Nugent. Audio episodes of Breathe can be found on Apple, Spotify, or Google podcast platforms. For video episodes and extra content, check out the Breath of Life YouTube channel. Breath of Life is faith-based content, resources, and programs from a contemporary urban perspective for those looking for hope and guidance. We believe that every breath we take is a testimony that God is consistent, that He loves us, and has a plan for our lives.